Beyond Screens is sponsored by IndieCade, and today we're talking with Chris O'Neill, who's a co-creator on one of the finalist games called Mazes. It's a tabletop role-playing game that will appeal to both the 12-year-old kid lurking inside of us, as well as the heavy metal enthusiast, as well as that person who just wants to sit down and play a game and not mess around with too much overhead.
Chris, can you bring the book back? That's beautiful.
Yeah. And so look at that book. Look at that book. So
gorgeous end papers.
Wow.
Ivory vellum interior line art, and the belly band, the small slip cover, which can be removed if you are a more rugged player.
So if you're asking, is the book one of the protagonists here on today's stream, the answer is yes. So just to say who we are, I'm Evan Torner, one of the IndieCade tabletop jury, and sitting here is Aaron.
Yeah, I'm Aaron Trammell. I'm also on the IndieCade tabletop jury. I'm really thrilled to be here and to play this game.
Chris, tell us about yourself in a couple of sentences.
My name is Chris O'Neill. I am the chief creative for Ninth Level Games. I have spent my long career at this point, been making games since the 90s, primarily in role-playing games. I've done some other stuff. Mazes is my long-term heart project. It is built on what we call Polymorph, which is the core system that runs underneath of it and runs all of our other games, including The Excellence, a game about cartoon princesses, Business Wizards, which is a game about being arcane spellcasters with dead-end corporate jobs, Rebel Scum, which is about punching Nazis in space, The Very Good Dogs of Chernobyl, about being intelligent dogs fighting monsters in Chernobyl, and Mazes, which is a classic take on the idea of sword and sorcery role-playing game, or very specifically the dungeon delving genre, where a bunch of ne'er-do-wells trying to go down into the dungeon and just make another day.
And when I first read this game, I thought this is a game that has a soul, right? There's a beating heart to it that transcends any images, texts, or mechanics that are in it. So I think that's one endorsement that I can say, right? That there's a vision that underlies it, that goes beyond all of it is a sum greater than its parts, but that then also it makes dungeon crawling an easy task and easy to run. And of course, since the Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition boom and Pathfinder boom that we've been under, there's been this one question in Dungeons and Dragons circles, and that is, where can I find a dungeon master? They're in short supply. Where are the dungeon masters? Well, the dungeon masters don't want to learn 5th edition. It's just a lot of folks to find that a barrier to entry. And I understand that. Even though I've dungeon mastered 5th edition, I also sympathize with that. And I think Mazes makes the dungeon master role a lot simpler. So one way we're going to structure this is we're going to again talk a little bit more about Mazes for a couple more minutes, and then we're just going to dive in and make characters and run an encounter and see how this thing works. Chris is going to talk us through a little bit about how running this game works, sort of from behind the scenes. So pitch us Mazes.
Were you going to say something, Aaron?
Yeah, Aaron.
Yeah, I was actually wondering if, before you teach us Mazes, if you could just tell us what inspired you to make Mazes.
So, the inspiration point, and Evan, I do super appreciate, saying that the game has a heart, right? Like, this is very personal to me. This game is a game I always wanted to make, but I never thought I'd be able to make, because the ground is littered with the corpses of fantasy heartbreakers, right? Since the very first, since Tunnels and Trolls, since someone said, hey, I can make my own Dungeons and Dragons, people keep making their own fantasy games, and then no one plays them, which means no one buys them, which means they're just left by the wayside. In fact, when someone goes, oh, I'm going to make a fantasy role-playing game, people are like, are you? Like, is that a good idea? But we had made the polymorph system, and a thing I've been working on for a very long time. And we were actually at Metatopia, which is a playtesting convention, and I was running a polymorph game. That one was a game set in what we call it's a game called 1666, or MDCLXVI, which is the Roman numerals for 1666, an alternate history game. And I was playing with Steve Segedy from Billy Pulpit. And Steve got done and said, Chris, if you don't make a fantasy version of this, someone else will. And I was like, oh, okay. And it just so happened that it was a few months before the first Zine Quest kicked on Kickstarter. And so my team and I talked about the likelihood of actually being able to do something. Because again, we didn't think this was something a lot of people were going to want. So we really leaned into that like throwback 1970s feel, it's just been my obsession. I love collecting the old games especially from the 70s and the early 80s. I love the actual books that people were reading at the time. They're really getting into. I mean, most of these games are not good from a modern perspective. Like I'm looking over on my shelves over here, and there's Avalon Hill games and Macamia Press, and stuff that it's just dense, and it's full of rules, and it's none of it is as slick and as exciting as the actual fiction that this stuff is based on. You read a Fafford and the Grey Mouser story, right? And they bring you right into the middle of the action. These two guys are, they do a thing and then it's over, and you like, it's breakneck. Like you can't stop reading it. And it's like very different from, turn to chart 38X to determine your height, weight, mass ratio index in order to determine the additional damage caused by your bows that have strength pulls. Very, very different experience. And so that's really where Mazes comes from. And then luckily, we just caught an audience, right? There's a bunch of people that really want this thing, which is they want the experience of what it felt like playing when they were 12, even though now they're old. Or as we keep saying to people, it's what the feeling is when you watch them play on Stranger Things, right? When she throws the die down the table at Eddie Munson, right? Like that's the feeling that we want to give people in this game. And that's really what our strive is. Because one of the things that happens, especially in this era of heavy streaming, there's all these people that are watching other people role play, and they're like, oh, that's something I want to do. And then it's like, oh, well, here you go. Here's the rule book. Oh, and here's another rule book. Oh, and here's another rule book. Oh, and you need to find a dungeon master, and you need to do this thing. And they're immediately just like, I don't want to do this. Right. And we're trying to avoid that. Right. So our pitch, to come all the way around to what Evan, you just asked me, like, pitch me Mazes, right? Mazes is what Dungeons and Dragons looks like it feels like, or it feels like what it looks like. Maybe that's how you it is super easy to create a character. It's episodic, and we can get going right away. You don't need a thing, and there's never any the most math you will ever have is when your die explodes. So
it sounds like we need to play this game. Let's try playing this game.
Yeah, I think I've heard all I need.
You're ready. You're bought in. You bought into the concepts. So, well, let's start with a really easy question, right? Which is, what do you want to do in the game, right? And this is probably the most important question that you can ask in any game, right? What do you want to do, right? So, do you want to be really good at the things that you're good at? That would make you the paragon, and it means that you're the D4. Or do you want to always be at the forefront of the action? Do you want to be running around, jumping, doing all those things? Then that you want to be the vanguard. You want to be the D6. If you just want to hit it with your sword, you don't really want to think about it too much. You just want to smash everything you meet. You want to be the D8. And if you want to be sure to survive and you want to keep everybody else safe, you want to be the sentinel, and that's the D10. So that's the first decision.
What are you feeling, Aaron?
I'm a Vanguard. I want to jump around. I want to do things. Give me some options. That sounds fun.
So you're going to need 2d6 in order to play this game, and that's all the dice that you're going to need.
I got them.
And I'm going to be rolling virtual dice here, and I want to hit things, so I'm going to be a fighter.
You're going to be the fighter, so you're going to take the d8. Okay. Now, the next thing we have to say is in a role-playing game, so now you've already determined what you want to do, right? Aaron's going to be running around, moving around, and as long as you are in polymorph games, as long as you are leaning into what it is that you do well, you will succeed more often than you will not. Okay. Evan, you want to hit things with your sword. That's what you want to do. Yeah. Or your axe or your magic spells, whatever it is, right? Because the next part about this is the fiction, right? What is the color of the thing that you're doing, right? Because it turns out that since we're not doing a simulation, we're not trying to do this. What we're really doing is emulating this activity. We don't really care about specifics. We care about what it looks like, right? So you have this opportunity as you're creating this character to say, how do you resolve your problems, right? Do you resolve it through martial arts? Like, are you using your weapons to do things? If so, you are a sword. If you are using the abilities of the shadow and the darkness, and you're gonna, sneak around and things like that, you are resolving things via shadow. Or are you a sorcerer? Do you have magical abilities that are going to resolve? Because, like, Evan, you're a D8, right? It doesn't matter if you have an axe. You're going to roll a D8 to attack and to do damage. If you have a poison dagger, you're still going to roll a D8 if you're going to attack or do damage. Or if you're throwing fireballs or shooting them with a wand of lightning, right? You're still going to roll a D8 to attack and to
This
do
reminds
damage.
me of Gamma World, where you're like often hitting people with like a giant traffic sign and rebar.
Actually, one of the elements from our design thing, one of our all-time favorite games is City of Heroes, an MMO that was in the early 2000s, and it really proved to us that it doesn't matter what you're swinging. If what I do is hit you with a blunt object, I am a mace guy. It doesn't matter if that blunt object is a street sign or a shovel or a piece of rebar or a medieval mace, right? I can change the color of it all I want, right? If I'm going to blast you with fire, if it's green fire and I say it's acid, who cares? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think I'm a mace guy, actually. I definitely think I'm a mace guy. The mace is named Skull Crusher, and my character's name is Shrimpy.
Shrimpy with Skull Crusher, and
Shrimpy has Skull Crusher. So the idea is this is someone who's much smaller than you'd expect, wielding a very large club.
You're gonna be a sword type character.
That's right.
Right. Okay. So I'm gonna go into the rule book.
Yes.
Are you a dangerous Bravo, a jaded sellsword, a knockabout ranger, the monster slayer?
A monster slayer.
You're monster slayer. Great.
Absolutely.
All right. So your class is called Monster Slayer. And one of the things that's important in mazes is your class isn't just a name. It's a descriptor. So you're encouraged as a player in this game, like in traditional OSR type role playing, to push the boundary, right? So when you think, you're going to be like, well, I know how to do that because I'm a monster slayer. Be like, oh yeah, I agree with that. Right? Which is how we're going to create advantage situations. And we'll talk about that in a second. But as a monster slayer, you are always well armed. You are bristling with weapons. And if you take a moment, you can change what you're doing so that you have the correct weapon for the situation.
I'm just going to share my screen just a little bit and say, here's the Monster Slayer like outline, right? Where it says how do classes work, and there is the outline for what I have. It says I'm always well armed, and it says as a hunter of vicious monsters, are you maze wise, or do you have you have loyal hounds, i.e. retainers?
Right. So you have retainers. So you can either you have a lot of knowledge about going into the dungeon, or you have a bunch of dogs at your command.
I didn't put the dogs in my brain, so I'm maze wise, and right. I definitely think this character is cunning because they're small.
Okay, and you're going to be cunning. So and you're a D8, so you have 8 hearts, and you have 2 stars. And we'll come back to that in a second. Hearts and stars. Other than that, you are done making your character, Evan.
Wow. That's
Aaron, you're
Yeah.
a Vanguard. You're a D6. Are you a sword? Are you a shadow? Or are you a sorcerer?
I'm gonna mix it up because I felt when I heard Vanguard, I was like, okay, this is the roguey type.
Yeah.
So intuitively, that feels like a shadow. But let's see what happens. I want to be. Did you say wand?
A sword, a shadow, or a sorcerer?
Sorcerer. Yeah, I will be a sorcerer.
You want to do magic, right?
Yeah.
Right, but you're going to run around. One of the things that's interesting, and this is like one of those things that it takes a minute sometimes for dyed in the wool D&D people. They're like, well, I'm a D10, so I can't be the wizard. And it's like, sure, are you like a fire tank? Like, are you a do you have a bunch of elemental rock people that do your bidding? That's a D10 wizard.
Yeah.
Right. You don't have a lot of power, but what you do have, you use it a lot, right? So as the D6 sorcerer, you're using magic to move around and to control the battlefield and do those things. So are you the blazing magician, the guild mage, the haunted librarian, the infernal summoner, the last elf, the quack alchemist, the underground druid, or the wise witch?
Yeah, these are all so flavorful.
And people at home, just so you know, there are 26 classes. There are 25 classes or 20, there's 24 classes in the book, but there's rules for how you can easily make them, and you can see how easy it would be to create new ones specific. So either creating them specific for your game or for a specific, just because there's a character concept that you have.
I'm so tempted to take Quack Alchemist because I love the idea of role playing a quack. But the last what was the second word?
The last elf.
The last elf. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna be haughty.
All right. So the last elf. Your first. Your class is the last elf, and your first edge is that you have an elf lineage. So let's say that you're a fire elf. So you the elves have all left. The elves have all left. We live in a burned out near post-apocalyptic fantasy hellscape. And the elves left a long time ago after they destroyed the world, because elves are awful, just so you know. Do you I think I have the answer to this. Do you practice a forgotten magic, or do you carry a magic weapon?
Yeah, so I'm haughty, so I definitely practice a forgotten magic.
You practice forgotten magic. Okay, so
Sure.
for simplicity here, let's say that you practice forge magic, which is fire and steel.
Okay, I love it.
And then finally, are you beautiful, cunning, or quiet? And quiet in this case means stealthy.
I'm beautiful.
You're beautiful. Of course, you're beautiful. You're a beautiful elf who practices forge magic.
Yeah, but only on the outside.
Inside, I'm a horrible person.
Yeah, I'm one of these elves.
You are a vanguard, so you have 6 hearts.
Okay.
And you have 3 stars. So hearts and stars. Hearts are like hit points. You're gonna use them primarily when you get hit, when you take damage. And it's important to note that this is a player active game. We don't, as GM, I never roll dice. Right. So when I attack you, I just say that you're being attacked. It's about what you do that's important. I don't roll dice to see if the laser golem hits you. You are going to say, I dodge it, or I'm going to stand up to it, and you're going to make a roll. The other thing that you do with hearts is on your turn, when you make an action that is violent, you have to spend a heart. So you literally are burning hearts, which is showing the grind of battle against you. So when you're saving against, you don't have to spend a heart, but when you take those actions directly, you lose that. Now your stars are your mana points, your special ability points, right? Your bonus meter. So you can spend a star to do lots of things, but primarily it's to take whatever your aspect is, and express what you want to do fictionally in that. So for Aaron, for you, it would be to use your magic.
Okay? That's my aspect.
Right. So you can use magic to do normal mundane things. Even like as a fire mage, you're gonna like throw fireballs. You don't need to spend anything to do that. That's just your attack. But if you want to make a permanent effect, you're like, oh, I'm going to lock this door with metal, or I'm going to create a bunch of swords or something like that. That would be a time when you would spend a star.
Could I burn down a house with
the Roll20 module that's coming out in the next few weeks? Anyone that backed our Kickstarter that got the Roll20 piece will get this just automatically added to their account. It's going to update from the old one. So on the right hand side, you'll see this thing called the Resolver, and this is how we do actions in mazes, right? On your turn, you are going to say that you want to do something, and then as the maze controller, as the dungeon master in this situation, I'll either say yes, that happens, or I will say, sure, give me a roll, right? Take your action, and your roll could be books, boots, blades, or bones, right? Books meaning your mind and your intelligence and your perception. Boots meaning you want to move around, you want to jump, you want to run. Blades, you're taking an action that is violent or conflict. And bones, you're standing against it, right? You want to stand up, whether that's bravery or your physical endurance, etc. Now, anytime you roll a 1 on your die, it just succeeds if it's something your character could do. So if Shrimpy is hitting a thing, a 1's always a success.
Right.
But if Valathrix is hitting a thing, that seems less like what Valathrix is doing. Now, if Valathrix was like telling someone to go get his horse, that would be a totally different situation. That 1 would absolutely work. His haughty, beautiful self. The crown is about will also succeed depending on the current darkness, right? So, Chris, what's darkness? Darkness is the resource that the GM has, and I'll come back to that in a second. But to the crown's the highest number.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
It sounds like a kind of board game element that you've introduced in, where there's like a darkness counter.
Yeah, in fact, very specifically, I think it is highly influenced from my times designing board games, where you're like, this is a very clear mechanic and it's very simple to use. One of the things that we see, and especially for people that are new to running games, one of the biggest fears is I don't know what's fair, right? Like if I just tell you, you all fall into a moat, right? Like the old rocks fall, the party dies, right? Like, how is that fair? And it's like, well, it's not necessarily fair, but you are the GM. It's if that's what has to happen, that's what has to happen. But more as an MC in a polymorph game, it amazes very specifically, you are going to present the hazard. The players are going to then address it with how they're doing things. And then there are consequences. And one of the consequences we call darkness, which accounts for the things that are outside of the space of just getting punched in the face or taking a condition, right? So you gain darkness, you give darkness to the GM for a couple of things. 1, for your starting treasure. 2, whenever you encounter a hazard. So basically the game is set up so that every time I put something in front of you, I have at least 1 darkness to play with. Or I'm increasing the darkness meter for the game. And I'll explain that in a second. My personal favorite way to gain darkness is when you enter the darkness, which is a fancy way of saying your characters walk into a dangerous situation. Right, you go into a dark room or you lose your torches or something like that. That is entering the darkness. Splitting the party. Go ahead, split the party all you want. It makes my life more difficult, but it also makes your life more difficult because now you have to give me darkness. Ignoring a present danger. And the one that I probably use the most, which is time passes. Anytime someone's like, oh, we'll just deal with that later, or we'll come back tomorrow. It's like, okay, that's fine. Give me a darkness. if we let darkness accumulate, what we're going to do is we're going to go through from bright to torchlight to bleak. While things are bright, anytime I roll a crown, it succeeds. I'm advantaged on some rolls. I'm going to talk about advantage in a second. And more importantly, anytime I spend a treasure, it affects everyone in the party. All the way, you keep gaining all the way up to bleak, where whenever you roll a crown, you literally fail. So that's why I can let darkness accumulate. And then again, especially for new GMs, this is a way of creating some drive without having to do a whole lot of story pacing, right? The act of just letting the darkness accumulate will drive the player's activities. But you can also spend the darkness as a resource to do all the things that exist in a lot of role-playing games that would generally be considered random. So the easiest one to think about is a random wandering monster. Hey, we're spending some time in an area. I'm going to roll on this chart to see if a monster attacks you, right? Instead, we're spending some time in an area. I want a monster to attack you. I'm going to spend a darkness to have that happen. Or I'm going to spend a darkness because you killed that guy too fast and I want him to stand back up. So especially for new, again, back to the idea of new GMs, or what is also really, I think, a strength here is people that used to run games or used to play games a long time ago and they haven't played in a long time. And it's like, trying to knock the rust off, right? The idea that just says, I can use darkness to do those things. And we actually have rules for how you can take OSR material, so like old Dungeons and Dragons modules, and convert their stats in using these things. And one of the nice things is darkness basically just becomes how you power any of those activities.
It kind of undifferentiates all these different badnesses that are thrown at you, like poison and whatever. It's just like, okay, this is bad stuff. That's what it is.
Bad stuff, right? The other kind of bad stuff that you can get are called conditions. So at any time, your character, you can say, I want to take a turn and I want to rest. But what that rest does is refill all of your hearts and stars. And when you do that, you take a condition. And so the most common conditions are stress, tired, and hurt. And they give you disadvantage on other rolls. So if you're hurt, you're disadvantaged when you're fighting. If you're stressed, you're disadvantaged when you're rolling against books. Now, the other side of this is it does give you back your hearts and your stars. So if you were to take damage and you don't have enough hearts, you go down and there's a chance that you might die. And it's funny because I often, when I'm playing with people that have played a bunch of mazes, they're like, wow, you are so much more lenient than I am. So this is really how much you enforce these rules are really dependent on your group. You can be really old school and you can crank it up where it's super deadly and super dangerous. Or you can be a little fungible, a little nicer.
So I'm seeing in all of these rules, just for folks at home, this really feels like Darkest Dungeon, the tabletop game, also in some
we've definitely gotten that a couple of times. I think Darkest Dungeon and this are both coming from the same place. There's a bunch of other games that I've talked about, and we talked about in like Where Are We Coming, things like Blades in the Dark, Torchbearer, The Black Hack, right? These are all games that we're taking this old idea of this harsh old school dungeon experience, and how does that translate into a modern way, right? And they're all coming from a different thing. Because like the thing about Darkest Dungeon that's great is the idea that you have all these permanent conditions that are just going to eventually make everything horrible. We don't have any of that memory. Like at the end of a game, you're going to spend some treasure and you're going to get rid of all these things and you're going to start afresh.
Yeah.
But like that game, sometimes you're just like, that guy's dead. Time to make a new guy. Yeah. Oops, cleric's dead. Need a new healer. Can we do that?
Anyways, I didn't mean to derail, but I was just observing this, and it comes out as what's the word?
I think you can easily run Darkest Dungeon in mazes. There's definitely some. Our next game is Return to Dark Tower, which feels even a little bit. It feels less like it in tone, but more like it in reality, because that's more of a heroic adventure. I think the last important thing to talk about before we do anything else is just advantage and disadvantage, and then we'll try. We'll actually roll some dice and try to do a thing. If you have an edge, and one of the edges, remember, your class is also considered an edge. So sometimes you might just say, "Oh, well, I am the last elf," right? So that's a thing that I should know about, right? I have an elf lineage, so I have all of these. It comes to me naturally, right? Like I have this old lore, right? You're encouraged to try to get as much of that as you can, because you're going to have the ability to roll with advantage when you use your edges, right? Which means you're going to roll 2 dice, and if either of them succeeds, it's successful. And then if both of them succeeds, it's a critical success, right? The same is true for things could be disadvantaged. You're trying to run through a swamp, and I'd say, okay, well, you give me a boots roll, but a disadvantage. In that case, you have to succeed on both of them, or it's a failure. And if you fail on both of them, then it's a fumble. Then it's a very bad failure. Okay. Valathrix and Shrimpy, 2 old friends.
Yeah.
You have Valathrix, a haughty fire elf from days gone by, wandering across the deep, deep deserts, and Shrimpy, his tiny, loaded down companion, through thick and thin. You are at a cave. This is a super important mazes rule. It's not even rule, really. It's just a way of expressing things. We call it the door to adventure, right? There is no shopping trip in mazes. You never go and figure out and do your thing. What you're going to have is a resource called treasure, which is an abstracted idea of how much things you have. So you guys can tell me how much treasure you want, and we'll start the darkness at whatever that level is. A lot of our pre-made modules actually set this up with a series of questions, and the questions are designed to give you the core activity about what's going on. So I will do that in just a second. But the other part of this is called the door to adventure, right? You don't have to go find the quest. There's no where's the plot. Can I dig the plot out of this tavern? Can I find the quest giver? Oh, there's a strange man in the corner. It must be him. I see an exclamation point above his head. You always start at the door to adventure. You start at exactly where the story begins. So in this case, Valathrix and Shrimpy, you are at you found a cave in the salt marsh that you have been trying to get away from after your last expedition went horribly wrong. Are you going into this cave because something is chasing you? Or are you going into this cave because you have seen an old rune that reminds Valathrix of a time before?
I think the rune. I think Valathrix sees a rune.
100%.
Okay. So I'm going to say that we're going to start with 2 darkness, and we will give you guys 2 treasure because of that. So you have 2 treasure. At any time, any player can spend their treasure to make up the equipment that you would need.
Do we have 2 treasure each, or is it a pool of 2 treasure?
You have a pool of treasure. Treasure is a community resource. And one of my favorite rules is that it's a community resource, but you don't have to ask anyone's permission to use it. So feel free to burn all of the party's treasure if you would like. That is up to you. And I've seen it work out great for me many times. When one person is just like, oh, we just have the treasure for that. I'm like, oh, great, I'll just take this treasure away.
I think I'm going to mark one off immediately, and Shrimpy raises a lantern fully lit and loaded.
I love it. So you spend a treasure. Because it is still bright, you have treasure enough for everyone. So you both have high quality lanterns. You're looking into the cave, and there is this sparkling rune. It is decked out. It looks like it's covered in gold, but it's probably just pyrite because it's a seam in a perfect a flat marble obelisk sitting in the middle of this otherwise empty cave. Suspiciously empty cave. There's no refuse, there's no animals, there's no lichen or mushrooms growing. The cave walls appear perfectly clean and dry, and you have been stumbling through the marsh for the last few days. Your boots are encrusted with salt. Your bellies.
So are there any like stones nearby us?
Yes, there are broken pieces of marble and there are natural stone. The floor itself appears to be natural. It's a natural cave floor until you get to this large obelisk of white marble with a golden rune inside. Valathrex, please give me a books roll with advantage because you are the last elf.
So ordinarily I just roll 1d6, but because I have advantage, I roll both, correct?
You're gonna roll both. If either of them succeeds, in this case, what you want is a 2 or a 3. A 1 would also work because it is the fact that you are an elf, and this is something elfin. And because it is still currently bright, a 6 would work because it would be a crown result for you because you are the vanguard.
Well, check it out. I got a 2 and a 3.
Okay, which is great. So you rolled a 2 and a 3, and because you have advantage, it's a critical result. As you have gotten closer and you can see the rune, you know that this obelisk is a marker for your people, the fire elves of far we'll call it Farhaven. The fire elves of Farhaven, your people, and this means that there is a cache of powerful items stored somewhere nearby.
Whoa, Shrimpy. This is the mark of my people.
Lo, Shrimpy.
And Shrimpy holds out a small but powerful hand and says, "I've got a bad feeling about how bare this cave is, Valatrix."
With that, because I love a dramatic moment. I'm going to spend one of the darkness because this isn't in my module. It's telling me what to do. But I like that idea so much that I'm going to spend the darkness. There's a flash of light that comes from the obelisk, and the whole room, the temperature rises. It's like a flash fire almost, and all the little like the dust and the road dirt on your clothing is all burned away. And the obelisk starts to slide into the earth.
Hark.
And as it slides into the earth, a giant lizard-like head jumps out of the hole from behind it, slathering with its jaws, dripping of ichor. It's a purplish a purplish gray lizard with 6 eyes and a countless number of legs, and it comes flying out. So as that has happened, I'm going to gain a darkness because you are encountering a hazard.
Yep. And I want to make a Monster Slayer books roll so I can identify the thing.
I love it. Give me a books roll with advantage because you are a Monster Slayer.
And that would be 2d8. And I'm looking at.
It's really 1d8, 1d8 in case you wanted to.
So I rolled a 3 and an 8.
So a 3 is great. The 3 is a success normally, but it's also still bright. So since you are the thing, that's also a success. You have encountered these before. These are Velociteer. Velociteer. They are extremely fast lizard-like creatures that are often used as steeds by small creatures like goblins. They have many legs. They sleep under the earth, and it appears that this one has been using this elven cache as a hiding place. Do either of you you know what, because Evan, because you are familiar with this, I'm going to actually say that you guys can act first. It doesn't surprise you.
Right.
So what would you like to do?
I shout its name, Velociteer, and then it's going to move quickly and eat us, so I gotta bludgeon it on the head real quick.
Give me a blades roll. Give me a blades roll. You are well armed, so give me it with advantage.
Right. I'll hit it with advantage with my blade. I've hit it with a 1 and a 4. So
all right. So the 4 is a hit, and the 1 is a hit because you are good at slaying monsters. It turns out it's in the name of your job.
That's right.
All right, so this is great because this is a crit result. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to roll for effect. So this is the third kind of roll that you can have in mazes. The most common effect is damage. So roll your die.
Okay, I'm going to roll just 1d8.
You're just going to roll 1d8.
6.
All right, so you're going to do 6 damage to this monster. But you had a critical result. So anytime that your effect roll rolls at the highest number, it explodes, meaning you get to roll another die and add it to it. When you have a critical result for damage, I actually always play it. Not everyone does this, but I like to just give you an automatic explode. So give me another D8.
Oh man. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do it. And the other D8 says a 7.
Jeez. You do 13 total damage to this monster. Luckily, it's armored. Otherwise, it would go down. In fact, you know what? I'm just going to say that it goes down so we can show you another piece. Because that was such a fast experience, I'm going to spend a darkness. And another Velociteer falls from the sky. It jumps out of its hiding place right behind Valathrix.
Now, when you said these were armored, is this like natural plating?
They're covered in knobbly scales that glitter. So what would you like to do, Valathrix? One of these has jumped from the ceiling. Shrimpy has demolished one with his oversized skull smashing mace.
That's right.
Oh God. I think what I want to do, I'm trying to think of what my magic types let me do here.
So there's a ton of information in this book, Mazes, on how you can use all that magic and do these things. But in this case, perhaps you would like to blow it up with fire or metal.
Okay, so it's not like a fire creature then. So yeah.
No. This is definitely like a rock creature.
Okay. But wait, so yeah, okay, so no minerals, just rock. I was thinking because I have this forge affinity, it'd be nice to melt something.
Yeah,
smelt it.
That. Spend a star.
Yeah, let me do that. Let me spend a star to tap into the minerals that are within its plating. Try to kind of corrode it and melt it, both into the creature and off of the creature.
Super important rule in mazes. Whenever you spend a resource, we're not going to ask you to roll dice. Okay. So again, the idea is we're telling a story. If you're going to spend a resource, we're not going to make it so that maybe it works. Right. Anytime you're going to spend a resource, if the GM will accept that resource, then it going to succeed. So you reach out with your forge magic and you pull you pull the latent metal and put bands of strong ore holding this piece. So as it falls from the sky trying to jump onto you, it gets wrapped up and it falls to the ground. Give me an effect roll.
Okay, and I use a d6 for that.
My favorite thing to say about all polymorph games is whenever you have to roll a die, you roll your die.
Let's do it.
Get it done.
What?
I got a 5.
You got a 5. All right. It falls to the ground. It is completely locked up and it has taken damage from the fall as it hits to the ground. And then in the because of time and things, we'll say that it explodes. It blows up. So it engulfs itself into a ball of dust and metal fragments, engulfing the entire room. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think can I try to intervene to make sure that the metal fragments go around the room to places that are not Shrimpy and I. Like, just try to...
Yeah, give me a bones roll.
Okay, let's do it. 6.
6 is perfect. That's exactly what you want. So you would have taken damage, but you managed to pull it. You only take 1 heart worth of damage because you've put up this shield and moved the metal fragments. Shrimpy, give me a boots roll as you dive to the ground and try to cover yourself up, but you can take advantage because of what Valthrix has done.
All right, so 2 rolls, and that will be a 4 and a 4.
4 and 4 is great. You managed to pull your cloak around yourself, and so even the dust, you don't even take 1 point of damage.
Okay,
and you're completely fine.
A minor nuisance.
It is 150.
Yeah, we are ready to debrief after that exciting cave encounter.
I'm going to stop
you
sharing
did
this
quite
piece.
a lot right there.
Right. I mean, to go from character creation to actually playing, and I think the people at home could see that, we were just starting. There was all kinds of ways that this could go. When I say, and I don't think this is incorrect. If you just watched what we just did, you got like 85% of the game. Like, one of the things that's funny, Aaron, you talked about the magic thing. If there's a weakness in just this book by itself, it's that in order to really get into a magic character, you have to have read it.
I see.
Because there's all kinds of stuff about the magic and realizing that while I think the magic system is super, super rad, it could be even easier. We're going to do a book next summer. We're going to do 2 books. We're going to do a thing called Beyond the City of Skull, which is an adventure campaign frame. And then a book called The Cunning Spell Book, which is a very simple magic system, which is like, oh, you have the spell book, the dancing flame of Daggeroth, and it's like, here are your 5 spells, so that we could literally just give it to someone and they can be off and running. So
yeah, magic is an old problem also, right? A lot of the earlier sort of theories of magic come from like taking a Jack Vance style system where you're just a mage is just a revolver filled with spells, very specific spells.
Yes.
And they fire, and then your revolver is empty, and you have to go lie down. And there are other games like Riddle of Steel, which resolve that, being like, no, every single mage is like giving up like their life force and their fingernails.
I have to burn my strength in order to do these things.
and all of these produce actually pretty unpleasant story effects. So one of the cool things about having a spellcaster is having them look up cool spells in a book. So I think that's a core that's a core thing that Mazes does. It'd be like, okay, if you're a spellcaster, then you're going to mimic the act of looking things up.
You're the only person who really needs to ever look at the book.
Yeah.
But also, like, then there's a haunting of the like spellcaster that just sling spells and like, I'll come up with stuff and do it, but which also challenges the dungeon crawling concept, because like in the dungeon actually is supposed to restrict your possibilities. You're not supposed to just make up whatever you want,
One of the things that I always think is interesting watching people play, and this is an MC player, like what your group is. So like I tend to be more forgiving about taking damage and what happens, but more like, well, that doesn't make any sense that you have that in your equipment. Where one of our main adventure writers, Patrick Clapp, is the exact opposite. He's like super stickler, like lose a heart, take 3 damage, you're gonna die, take a condition. But then they're like, oh, I have a potion of I have this potion of etherealness in our bag, and we spend a treasure. He's like, oh yeah, that's fine. I was like, okay. But it's about what kind of a story are you telling, and what are you trying to do?
Yeah.
I think in the fullness of time, we'll see more. Hey, here's different things you can use treasure for. Here's different things you can use darkness for. We try to do like darkness spend suggestions in our modules. Like, hey, if you're new to this, or here's some things that you might not think, that are thematic to this activity. Which I really like. And I think when we get the cunning spell book done, it'll be more of that, like, oh, yeah, I have these. I'm going to look up. I'm going to figure out what I'm doing. Do I still have that? I have like a couple of minor effects. I have a couple of bigger effects. And then I have all right, I'm done for the day, guys. I just, I cast my fireball and I'm done.
So, Chris, I loved you had mentioned earlier when we were playing that you have a system that's coming out soon that's going to allow players to adapt like any module to.
No, that's actually in.
It's in there
in the book. Yeah. It's section 7. On what has come before. Because again, while this is a very modern system, it's very specific. The activity of the dungeon delve is well trod by adventure writers. There have been tens of thousands of dungeons made. You could literally grab any of the Goodman Games dungeon series. You can grab any old school TSR module. I ran Doug Niles, I forget what the name of the module, an old TSR module. I ran that for my friends last year, and we ran the module straight. I didn't change anything. All I did was convert the stats to mazes on the fly, because it's very simple. Did you have a question about that? I realize I got salesy.
I just think it's great that it allows players to pull in this library of materials that they already have and jump into a game there in a very lightweight way.
And I also love that, not just for things that they have, but it also keeps it current in things like Zine Quest, and a very active OSR community. There's a lot of really cool stuff. I love old school essentials. I buy all the old school essential stuff because I can use it all in mazes with minimal changes. In fact, what's great is now for like a 5th edition magic item, a little difficult, but a 1st edition magic item, you can just put it into mazes because it doesn't have any game effects. It's like, oh, you can fly. You run very fast. You are immune to poison. You're like, oh yeah, all these things make sense. And I actually use the D&D Cyclopedia, which was the hardcover book that came out after all of the basic. I use that for doing treasure in my games. So at the end of a game, we roll treasure, and the magic items and the things they get are from when they get magic items, they come out of that book. And I don't change them at all. I just, as ridiculous as they come out, you have a filter of animal control. Okay. You have a a staff of rewinding. It's like, all right. And those are one of the few persistent things that I use in games. Mostly they're completely episodic.
Very cool.
So for a game that's this simple but yet intricate and also original, I mean, that's what really distinguishes it from a lot of OSR projects. It has its own everything, right? And to some degree is able to absorb earlier systems as kind of meta system, as you said in chapter 6. Yeah. But you're going to put out some supplements. So how are your supplements going to not be like the supplements that killed Advanced Dungeons and Dragons?
So we're being very specific about what we're doing. So the next one that comes out is called Return to Dark Tower, and it's based on the board game, and it's adding a different set of systems for playing like the heroic long-term campaign. In fact, it has, I'm stealing my favorite system of all time. I'm stealing we are stealing. We have stolen the piece from Robin Laws's The Guy in Reach, which is how you make a bad guy that you all agree on. Like so you start out by being like, who is it that has the tower and why have we not been able to stop him? And it's really, that's really fun. City of Skulls is going to be our first like campaign, so it's kind of a format that shows this is what the campaign world looks like, and so the focus there is really on the world. Cunning Spellbook is really going to just be an ablative system, right? We're not trying to build a million splat books. We are doing modules. We have a thing called Mazes Monthly, which is on DriveThruRPG. And it's every month a new module comes out that has everything you need, so you could just play. It's everything for one session of play. What we don't want to do is we don't want to change fundamentals in the system. In fact, one of the things that we talk about in our polymorph, which the underlying system, we have a system resource document for that. And in that we talk about, please don't change the math. The core math that is driving the dice and the activities needs to be the way it is. If you start to change it, I can't guarantee what it will do, because we've play tested it forever. We know everything about how the math is working. So as long as all you're doing is creating new classes, or like for instance, we could do a book that is just lineages, right? Like here are 50 different fantasy lineages. I'm an elf, I'm a dwarf, I'm a centaur, right? That's not going to, all I have to do is describe what they are. I don't need to do any kind of rules pieces. So that's really what our drive is, to not stick ourselves in the eye with a pencil, which is what every edition of every game ever does, because we live in a capitalist hellscape that requires constant growth in order to be successful.
Well, I really appreciate, again, the meta level of this game, but the fact that it doesn't lose itself in the meta level. Again, it returns to what's the heart of the activity, and how are we going to make this dungeon activity feel like the Dungeons and Dragons in Stranger Things, when we're not actually they're not playing that game, and neither are we in our minds.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's all I really want. I really want, when people are done, regardless of what happened, that they go, oh, that was a good time, right? Our first game was Kobolds Ate My Baby, and that's a game that is built on the dictate that says rules are dumb, let's have a good time, and mazes, I think we're trying to do that, which is not necessarily that rules are dumb, but it's that let's keep the rules out of the way, right? Our goal is elegance. That is what I am looking to try to get, that every rule is there for a reason. That there's not just a rule. In fact, we've cut so much. We've cut it. Oh, this rule. Oh, I don't think we need it. Can we go shave that one off? Can I shave that down?
Definitely think you succeed in having a good time. So this was a blast to play mazes with you.
Yeah, this was super fun. Having never played a game with either of you, I didn't know how deep we would get. But the moment it was like, oh, I believe that this is wrong, I was like, oh, we're good to go. We're good to go. I know exactly what we got here. I did get a little afraid of Shrimpy. It was like, all right. But Michael Moorcock would definitely write a story about.
Right. I was going to say, it's a more Cockian character, and I played it that way.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Dead serious, even though nothing is serious about it.
Yeah, I mean, what a great. That is super Moorcockian, right? Like it's like, oh, my name is Purple Peter, but everyone fears me across 17 lands. Why do they fear you? Well, I've eaten their mothers. What?
Okay.
And I Aaron, I do appreciate that you got that the last elf is Elric, right? Like that's the whole point is the elves are super bad guys that ruined everything, and now we're like, in the zine edition of the game, we called it the Forgotten Elf, and when we changed it to the Last Elf, it was like, now I see what you're doing. I see what you have.
Yep, exactly.
Well, that's been our hour together. So I really appreciate you being with us, Chris, and also thanks to Aaron and Adam and Parker for supporting this particular episode of Beyond Screens. And again, congrats again to you, Chris, and your team on your IndieCade finalist status.
When we heard that, we were floored. And the company is all these other games are great, but the exposure and the opportunity, thank you. We very excited.
Excellent.
Well done.
And thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and please tune into IndieCade everywhere for everybody, and we look forward to you trying out mazes at home. Thanks.